Hello, my name is Lexi. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm talking about the book Why We Get Sick by Benjamin BIKMAN. Okay, so it has taken me a while to read this book. I can't remember when I started it, but it was at least a few months ago. It is definitely heavy on the science, a lot of scientific terms and just talking about systems of the body. So it did take me a while to get through it, partially just because of what's going on in my life. I've been really busy, but I just wanted to share with you guys what I thought about it and what it's about. So if I had to sum up what the book is about, it is about insulin resistance. And Dr. BIKMAN works at BYU as a professor and head of the diabetes research lab. And BYU is actually my alma mater. I went there. I graduated in 2004. So I guess he and I were actually there at the same time doing our undergrad, because he did his undergrad there and graduated in 2003. So we were there at the same time, just in different departments. So I never met him, but I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, yeah, he does a lot of work on insulin resistance and diabetes. So I'm going to read this kind of introduction in the beginning. It says, "My main goal is to demystify the science of insulin resistance so that anyone can appreciate what it is and why it's dangerous. I want to arm you with the knowledge of how to prevent and even reverse insulin resistance, all based on sound and published evidence. And I want to teach you the steps to preventing disease through simple lifestyle changes, no prescriptions required." So I'd say that's a pretty good summary of the book, and definitely deals with insulin resistance and how insulin impacts so many different systems of the body, which I definitely did not realize how many organs and systems insulin has an effect on until I read this book. Okay, so if you don't know, what is insulin resistance? I thought this was a really good explanation. I heard this, not through this book, but it was, I think, on the Fasting Method podcast. And someone said insulin is like your mom trying to talk to you when you have your music playing. And instead of listening to your mom when she's whispering, you keep turning your music up louder and louder, and your mom is trying to yell to get your attention, but you can't hear her because the music is so loud. And that's basically what insulin resistance is. It's when you keep secreting so much insulin because of how you're eating and other lifestyle factors, which are definitely discussed in this book. And because your body is secreting so much of it, your body becomes deaf to it, basically. It can't hear the insulin anymore. It's not effective. And so your body is insulin resistant. And even though you have such a high level of insulin circulating throughout your body, it's not doing its proper job anymore. So insulin itself is not a bad thing. We need it. It's very important. But when it is not working effectively, it will create lots of havoc, which is what this book is addressing. So like I said, this book talks about a lot of the different systems that insulin resistance affects, and that different organs of your body actually become insulin resistant. It's not just your pancreas. Like, I thought, insulin mainly just dealt with the pancreas, right? Because that's what secretes the insulin. But your brain can become insulin resistant, your kidneys, your just all these different organs. It affects your heart, your lungs. Like, basically all of your organs are, there's this delicate balance with insulin that has an effect on all of those different organs. And I really like this explanation on page 95. It's talking about hormones, and it says that hormones affect hormones. There are certainly non-hormonal influences such as stress or sleep deprivation, but once bodily levels of one hormone start to change, it starts pulling other hormones out onto the dance floor. Because insulin is so central in controlling metabolic function in the body, it's no surprise that insulin is a popular dance partner. Everyone seems to want insulin's attention, including insulin itself. And so it's just talking about hormones and how they all have effects on each other. And it's really quite complex. And that is why, the whole idea of just calories in, calories out does not work for someone who is insulin resistant and who has all of these hormones out of whack. Now, of course, as I am a fasting channel, I was curious to see how much fasting would be mentioned in this book. And it actually is not mentioned very much, which I would say is one of the downfalls of this book. But he does talk about the importance of fasting, and he does recommend that people do time-restricted eating. His recommendations for fasting are definitely very conservative, but there's only a couple pages in here that are about fasting. So I'm gonna read. So there's this little chart in here that kind of talks about the things that are not activated when you are frequently eating. Also, with that, he says if you're on a high carbohydrate diet and you're frequently eating, you're going to have a high level of insulin, which is going to inhibit fat use or lipolysis, increase fat storage, inhibit liver glycogen use, increase liver glycogen storage, inhibit ketogenesis, and inhibit autophagy. And then on the other side of that, so on this chart, when you are fasting and you have carbohydrate restriction, or you limit your carbs, you have low insulin, which then activates fat use or lipolysis, inhibits fat storage, activates liver glycogen use, inhibits liver glycogen storage, activates ketogenesis, and activates autophagy. So those are all the things that we know as fasters. Those systems come into play when your body goes into a fasted state. Your insulin levels drop, and all of these healing processes and fat burning and using up your glycogen storage, that's what happens when we fast. So Dr. BIKMAN's recommendations are to test your fasting insulin, which he gives some recommendations of how you can do that, some resources of places you can go to have it done. It is a little bit tricky. I know in the United States, a lot of doctors are hesitant to do it because they just don't see the reason. And I do hope that eventually that's something that will change, is that doctors will see the importance of fasting insulin levels, because as Dr. BIKMAN talks about in this book, this is a precursor to diabetes. So if you have high levels of fasting insulin, your body can tell you that you are, insulin resistant. Therefore, you are much, much more likely to develop type 2 diabetes in the future, even though that may not show up for years to come. So it's kind of just like a warning sign. And the other thing that he says you can do, because he does say that even sometimes people with low fasting insulin levels still may be insulin resistant. And so the way to really, another way to tell is that you can have this test done where you take 75 grams of pure glucose, then you get your blood drawn every 30 minutes. And he says that if your blood glucose peaks at 30 minutes, so obviously if you eat if you have pure glucose, your blood sugar is going to go up. So he says if that peaks at 30 minutes and then comes back down, you are insulin sensitive. If it peaks at 60 minutes and then comes back down, you're probably somewhat insulin resistant. And then he says if it progressively climbs and peaks at 120 minutes or 2 hours, you're definitely insulin resistant and 15 times more likely to have type 2 diabetes in the future. So he recommends to do that in a clinical setting. I bet you could sort of do something like that at home just to at least get an idea. So I don't know, I guess you could eat something with 75 grams of glucose in it or sugar, and then test your blood sugar before and every 30 minutes, and just see what happens with your blood sugar level. And then his recommendations do largely rely on eating low carb. So if you've been following me for a while, you know that I do not do a low carb diet. I don't track my macros, but when I have, I'm pretty much moderate across all the macros. I'm not low carb or high carb. I'm not low fat or high fat. I'm just somewhere in the middle. And so personally, I believe that there's all these different levers you can pull as far as bringing your insulin down. And since I'm an alternate day faster and I do 36, well, really like 40-hour fasts 3 times a week, that's where I do the work of lowering my insulin. And I'm not consuming like crazy amounts of sugar, so that definitely helps as well. But there's all these different things you can do, and he does talk also a little bit about things that are mentioned in the Glucose Revolution book by Jessie and Shousby. You know, she has all these hacks that help you to lower your blood glucose. And so all of these different tactics, including managing your carbs, including fasting, including exercise, which he does talk a lot about exercise, the importance of exercise, finding something that you can do consistently. He says that resistance exercise is probably the best, but anything you can do consistently is great. He gives recommendations of exercises you can do, of foods you can eat that will kind of lower your glycemic load. So there's a lot of that, but you know, again, I just have to say that like there's all of these different sort of levers that you can pull. So if you don't want to eat low carb, then I think it's important to at least know what's going on in your body. So, you know, maybe do some blood sugar testing. If you have access to a CGM, I think that would be an amazing tool to figure out how things affect your blood sugar, because ultimately what we want is to have steady glucose levels. That's what we all want. And so the way you get there, there's different paths to get there. And the things he talks about in this book are primarily low carb and exercise, a little bit of fasting. Like his fasting recommendations are, like I said, very conservative. So he kind of just recommends to at least fast 12 hours a night and maybe go up to 18 hours a few times a week and up to 24 hours once a month. And so I think that for some people that could be a great plan, especially if they are managing their carbs. Then yeah, like that could be great. Or you could do what I do and kind of eat more moderately and fast longer. So I just think that you have to experiment and find out what works for you and what's going to be that solution. Okay, so then in summary, like who do I think should read this book or who would benefit from it? I think that if you're someone who really enjoys science and you want to strengthen your why as to fasting and managing your blood glucose, I think this is a great resource. I think that if you have a hard time reading books with a lot of science in them, you may not like this book. If you had a hard time reading the obesity code, this may be challenging for you. You may like the audio version. I don't know. I haven't listened to it. I think it is a lot of information to listen to, so I would listen to it slowly and digest it. But there is tons of good information in here. This definitely could strengthen your why as to just progressing in your health journey. I think that, again, I think there are various meandering paths as to how to get there. And this gives a lot of good suggestions, things to look at in your life and decide, you know, like, are these factors a problem for me? And, you know, as far as my habits and things you do in your daily life. And if so, what can I change to make this a little better? So do let me know if you read this book or if you've read it, what you learned from it. And I hope that helps someone out there. So have a great week and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.